The San Antonio Spurs just walked into Madison Square Garden and completely changed the direction of the NBA Finals. After dropping the first two games at home, they were facing a situation that looked almost impossible. No team had ever come back from losing the opening two finals games on its own floor and gone on to win the championship. The pressure was enormous, the criticism was growing louder, and the final image from Game 2 only made things worse. Wembanyama and Stephon Castle miscommunicating on a crucial possession when the Spurs desperately needed everything to be perfect. Before we dive into the biggest reasons Game 3 changed everything, make sure to subscribe if you enjoy NBA Finals coverage and basketball breakdowns. This series just got a whole lot more interesting, and there are plenty more twists still to come. Coming into Game 3, the mission was simple. San Antonio did not just need a win, they needed answers. Through the first two games, New York had controlled too many key matchups and forced the Spurs to constantly react. But in Game 3, San Antonio finally found solutions, and the first one started with how they attacked the Karl-Anthony Towns matchup. Through the first two games, Towns had been creating major problems. His ability to stretch the floor pulled Victor Wembanyama away from the basket, weakening one of San Antonio's greatest defensive strengths. Every possession seemed to force the Spurs into a difficult choice. Stay attached to Towns on the perimeter or keep Wembanyama closer to the rim where he could dominate defensively. This time, San Antonio flipped the pressure back onto New York. Instead of allowing Towns to dictate the matchup, the Spurs repeatedly involved him in actions with Castle and Wembanyama. Suddenly, Towns had to make difficult decisions of his own. Castle attacked downhill aggressively, forcing the defense to collapse. On one early possession, New York committed extra defenders to stop the drive, allowing De'Aaron Fox to attack the paint and set up Wembanyama for an easy finish at the rim. The Spurs kept going back to it. Castle attacked, help defenders rotated, and Wembanyama found himself catching the ball much closer to the basket. That was the critical adjustment. Instead of receiving the ball 25 feet from the hoop and being asked to create everything himself, he was getting deep position where his size became nearly impossible to deal with. And the best part was that Castle was not just creating opportunities for Wembanyama, he was attacking New York himself. From the opening minutes, he looked determined to leave his mark on the game. He got defenders off balance, absorbed contact, and finished tough plays through traffic. Every drive put pressure on the Knicks defense and forced them into uncomfortable rotations. For the first time in this series, it felt like New York was the team scrambling to find answers, and that shift completely changed the tone of the game. Stephon Castle deserves a ton of credit for the way he approached Game 3. There were multiple drives where he absorbed contact, attacked bigger defenders, and still came away empty-handed without getting a whistle. Yet none of it changed his mindset. He kept attacking, kept putting pressure on the defense, and kept making the right play. That relentless approach ended up setting the tone for the entire Spurs team. More importantly, Castle was not waiting around for Victor Wembanyama to rescue the season. He actively helped create the conditions for Wembanyama to dominate. That was the biggest difference compared to earlier games in the series. Instead of forcing Wembanyama to create everything himself, San Antonio built an offense that allowed both young stars to thrive together. The opening quarter showed exactly what that looks like. The Spurs won the period 33-22, immediately taking control of the game. Wembanyama scored 9 quick points while protecting the rim with 2 blocks. Castle added 7 points and 3 assists while shooting a perfect 3 for 3 from the field. As a team, San Antonio recorded 11 assists on 14 made baskets. That stat tells the story. This was not isolation basketball. This was ball movement, teamwork, and players feeding off one another. The final numbers were incredible. Wembanyama finished with 32 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 3 blocks while shooting 11 for 18 from the field. Castle delivered 23 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists on 8 for 14 shooting. Together, they became the first teammates aged 22 or younger to each score at least 20 points in an NBA Finals game. That is historic territory. The individual milestones are just as impressive. Through his first 3 NBA Finals games, Wembanyama now has 85 points and 10 blocks. The only other player in league history to reach those numbers through his first 3 Finals games was Shaquille O'Neal. Meanwhile, Castle's 23-point, 5-rebound, 5-assist performance puts him alongside names like Tony Parker and Magic Johnson among the youngest players to produce those kinds of numbers on the final stage. That should excite Spurs fans because it feels like the foundation of something special. But the second major reason San Antonio won Game 3 was how they handled New York's inevitable response. After getting dominated in the opening quarter, the Knicks came roaring back. Jose Alvarado injected energy into the game with aggressive scoring. Jordan Clarkson knocked down a big three. Karl Anthony Towns became more assertive offensively, and OG Anunoby capitalized on a Spurs mistake for another huge basket. Suddenly, New York started looking like the team that had won 13 straight playoff games. The momentum kept building. Jalen Brunson hit a three-pointer that gave the Knicks their first lead of the night, and Madison Square Garden exploded. But unlike previous games, San Antonio had answers. Wembanyama immediately responded with a three-pointer of his own. Moments later, he sprinted down the floor, caught a perfectly placed pass from De'Aaron Fox, and hammered home a one-handed alley-oop. Every time New York landed a punch, the Spurs found a way to punch right back, and that changed everything about the flow of Game 3. But even with San Antonio playing some of its best basketball of the series, New York refused to go away. Every time the Spurs created separation, the Knicks found a response. OG Anunoby attacked the rim with confidence, even challenging Wembanyama directly for a powerful finish. Josh Hart continued doing the unexpected, stepping into another three-pointer and knocking it down. Then came the type of possession that has made New York so dangerous throughout this playoff run. The ball zipped around the perimeter. Anunoby moved it to Mikal Bridges. Bridges quickly found Hart. Hart immediately swung it to Jalen Brunson, who buried a catch-and-shoot three. That sequence was exactly what San Antonio had been trying to avoid. The Spurs can survive some of New York's isolation-heavy possessions. They can live with difficult one-on-one shots. But when the Knicks start moving the ball, forcing defensive rotations, and creating open looks for multiple players, they become much harder to contain. That second quarter explosion showed exactly why. New York poured in 42 points during the period, while shooting an incredible 14 for 19 from the field. They connected on 6 of 9 shots from deep and recorded 9 assists. It was offensive basketball at its best. San Antonio entered the quarter holding an 11-point lead and left halftime trailing after being outscored by 18 points. Madison Square Garden was roaring, and it felt like the Knicks were taking complete control. But unlike the first two games, the Spurs answered. San Antonio came out of halftime with far more urgency and won the third quarter 35-27. By the time the period ended, the Spurs had reclaimed a 1-point lead. One of the biggest moments came from Dylan Harper just after Jordan Clarkson drilled a difficult step-back three that tied the game. It felt like another one of those moments where New York's momentum might become overwhelming. Instead, Harper immediately answered with a huge three-pointer of his own. His shooting night was not perfect, but his overall impact was impossible to ignore. He battled on the glass, pulled down 9 rebounds, played strong defense against Brunson, and committed 0 turnovers. Those contributions mattered in a game where every possession felt crucial. That leads directly to the third major reason San Antonio won Game 3. For the first time in the series, they stopped giving New York easy opportunities. The Knicks still won plenty of the traditional hustle categories. They out-rebounded the Spurs 56-48. They dominated second chance points 21-10. They scored more fast break points and even edged San Antonio in points in the paint. On most nights, those numbers point toward a Knicks victory. But one area finally swung in San Antonio's favor. The Spurs took care of the basketball. After turnover problems haunted them in games 1 and 2, San Antonio committed just 8 turnovers in Game 3. Meanwhile, New York turned it over 13 times, and the Spurs converted those mistakes into 21 points. Instead of handing the Knicks easy offense, San Antonio forced New York to earn almost everything. And strangely enough, one of the most fascinating parts of that story involved De'Aaron Fox, who somehow managed to be both frustrating and incredibly important at the same time. De'Aaron Fox had one of the strangest performances of the entire game. On one hand, his scoring numbers were rough. He finished with just 12 points on 4 for 14 shooting and missed all 5 of his attempts from three-point range. There were even moments that left Spurs fans shaking their heads. One late possession perfectly summed it up. Fox passed up an open three, lost his balance, and then threw the ball out of bounds. It was the kind of sequence that made it feel like nothing was coming easily for him offensively, yet somehow he still played a major role in the victory. Fox finished with 8 assists and only 2 turnovers, helping San Antonio maintain control of the basketball throughout the night. He came up with a huge chase down block on Karl Anthony Towns and later knocked down one of the biggest shots of the game, extending the Spurs' lead to 5 points during a crucial stretch of the fourth quarter. Even without an efficient scoring performance, he found ways to impact winning. That has become a recurring theme for him throughout these playoffs. The bigger story, though, was what happened to New York's offense after halftime. Jalen Brunson still finished with 32 points, so it was not like San Antonio completely shut him down, but the flow of New York's offense looked very different. Brunson ended the night with 5 assists and 5 turnovers, and the Knicks managed only 6 assists in the entire second half after recording 12 before halftime. The beautiful ball movement that fueled their second quarter explosion disappeared, and perhaps the most important development was Karl Anthony Towns fading into the background. Towns has been New York's biggest matchup advantage in this series. His ability to stretch the floor and pull Wembanyama away from the rim changes everything, but in Game 3 he finished with only 11 points on 10 shot attempts and missed both of his 3-point attempts. Even more surprising, he attempted just 1 shot during the opening quarter. For a player capable of creating so many problems for San Antonio, that level of involvement simply was not enough. Which brings us to the biggest takeaway of all. The fourth answer was not about strategy, shooting, or individual matchups. It was about closing. Through the first 2 games, the Spurs repeatedly put themselves in position to win and then watched the game slip away. Game 1 was there for the taking before mistakes piled up in the fourth quarter. Game 2 was even more painful, as San Antonio erased a massive deficit only to see a late miscommunication destroy the comeback. This time, when the pressure arrived and the game tightened up, the Spurs finally found a way to finish the job, and that may end up being the most important development of the entire series. For 2 full days, the Spurs had to live with the image of Game 2. Their superstar and their lead guard were not on the same page during the biggest possession of the season, and that mistake ended up costing them a chance to tie the series. It was the kind of moment that can linger, especially in the NBA Finals. And for a while in Game 3, it looked like history might repeat itself. The fourth quarter was far from pretty. Both teams struggled to create separation. Possessions became messy, shots got tougher, and neither side seemed capable of delivering the knockout blow. But this time, San Antonio kept finding small ways to win. Wembanyama played a huge role in that. He went a perfect 6 for 6 from the free throw line in the fourth quarter, and every single point mattered in a game this close. Instead of letting pressure affect him, he stepped up and delivered when the Spurs needed him most. Then came Stephon Castle. With just over 2 minutes remaining, Castle launched a difficult 3-pointer that felt more like a desperation attempt than a designed to play, but it went down. Looking back, that shot may have been the biggest basket of the night. It pushed San Antonio's lead to 7 and gave them just enough breathing room. Of course, New York refused to go away. Jalen Brunson answered with a huge transition 3 to cut the deficit to 3 with 33 seconds left. Suddenly, the pressure was right back on the Spurs. That is when De'Aaron Fox delivered his biggest moment of the game. Despite struggling offensively for much of the night, he calmly pulled up between 2 defenders and knocked down a clutch mid-range jumper with 12 seconds remaining. That shot effectively sealed the win and completely changed the conversation around his performance. Without it, people would have focused on the missed shots. Instead, they remember the 8 assists, the smart decision-making, the key defensive plays, and the biggest basket of the game. After that, New York continued fighting. OG Anunoby knocked down another 3 because, at this point, it feels like he always does. The game turned into a free throw battle, and the Knicks still had chances. But this time, the Spurs did not give the game away. No costly turnover, no heartbreaking miscommunication, no late collapse. They finished the job, and that is the most important takeaway from Game 3. It was not perfect, it was not beautiful, but it was exactly what San Antonio needed. They finally got a win on the board, regained some confidence, and proved could close out a tight finals game. Most importantly, they kept their season alive and took the first step toward attempting something no team in NBA Finals history has ever accomplished. Coming back from a 0-2 deficit after losing the first 2 games at home. That challenge is still enormous, but for the first time in this series, the Spurs have real momentum on their side.